And hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Valley Blue webinar series. Our topic for today is future-focused enterprise architecture, especially using the business model canvas approach to driving your innovation. So a few hygiene factors. Of course, there's a chat bar in your browser window. Hopefully you've joined through that. So feel free to ask any questions as we go along. But we will have a Q&A section at the end of the session as well. So we've only got 30 minutes, but hopefully that's enough to at least get your brain juices flowing. And let's start with a bit of an introduction to myself and so on. So I'm George. I'm part, of course, of the Valley Blue team. My role is pre-sales solution consultant. And I've been in the enterprise architecture space for about 15 years or so. So I've been around the block, done a bit of pre-sales, done a bit of consulting, training, support, and yeah, I love to dabble in a bit of architecture, of course. So in terms of the topic that we have prepared for today's session, there's a couple of key things that we'll aim to address as part of the session, but again, as part of follow-up, keen to hear more from everyone in the audience, and if there's additional topics that are of interest, then just let us know as well. But the 4 key things that we'll be covering today, first of all, I see innovation, since that's part of the title, and how that ties to strategy. So a bit of a backdrop to that. Our main member of the cast today, of course, is the business model canvas itself. So talk a bit about that, a bit of a recap, and also how we actually use that in practice. So our main alignment here is around enterprise architecture. So using the business model canvas as a way to obviously propagate through the rest of your designs and other things like that. But we'll wrap up with a bit of innovation and the next steps in essence. But hopefully this will be an interesting session for everyone on the webinar today. And yeah, let's get started with the topic at hand. So the first thing that we'll talk about today is a bit around the change aspects. So really setting the scene for the rest of the transformation, etc. And as we know, being in obviously different roles, you could be an architect, you could be an analyst, you could be someone within the PMO team, etc. Obviously, change is something that doesn't just come overnight. So it is a challenging thing to deal with, a very big prospect to sometimes deal with, and it involves crossing proverbial rivers, climbing those mountains to get to the castle on the top of the hill, so to speak. So really, that's to say that change, of course, is a journey. It's hard, but why and how and what makes it to the hardest activity to deal with? Obviously, there are other things that are harder as well, but in terms of change and journeys and transformations, yeah, of course, it's difficult. So, of course, change itself is about looking at where you are right now. So looking back at the picture that we saw before, okay, starting off the journey, where are you now? But of course, change is about the journey ahead. So what is your next step, and the next, and the next, and the next? So traditionally, we think about change in terms of overview, and that's often the point there. It's hard to get those insights and hard to get an overview of the whole landscape. So therefore, it's more difficult to spot risks, perform your impact assessments, and of course have that predictability around costs. So be around things like your capabilities of your processes, your people, and all that kind of stuff. So that's often the challenge with identifying where you are now. So not having that visibility of everything. So there's nothing really too surprising. But what we also see, of course, is when you're talking about that journey and the next step, there are often blockers or challenges in terms of alignment. So both in terms of the vertical alignment, so linking to strategy, so what the business has overall in terms of planning, the corporate strategy, etc. But I'm sure all of you have experienced this as well in your roles around the horizontal alignment. So we often talk about business versus IT and the lack of alignment, but also horizontal alignment sometimes refers to the lack of alignment between teams as well. So people that are within an architecture team or within a business analysis function, etc. So that makes it, in terms of combining all together, almost like a bit of a perfect storm of things. And so how does innovation fit into change? Well, I think it's a bit of a no-brainer here. But in terms of our thinking, combining the two, innovation is about knowing where you are and also knowing your next step. So driven by different people within the organization, functions and collaboration. And traditionally, when we think about especially enterprise architecture, so the traditional mode of operation is about managing your current state. So things like processes, applications, technology, data, security, everything else in between. But we'd like to think that that's sort of, again, traditional, a bit old school in terms of thinking. Now, there are component parts that drive you towards innovation. And it's not just about managing what you have right now. So that's kind of a bit tactical, as we'll see in a minute. So the component parts that are necessary for driving successful innovation include strategic planning. So identifying projects, in essence, for strategic change and not just something that's a bit ad hoc. But in order to change as well, you all often find opportunities to change what you have right now. We'll talk a bit more about that in a second. So we refer to that as tactical planning. So just managing the current state on its own is not obviously the be all and end all. But we can be a bit more tactical at times to identify projects that basically change the current landscape. So it could be change and automation in a particular process, or mastering data in a more secure environment, that kind of thing. And innovation isn't just about that strategy piece as well. It's about delivery. So that's what we refer to as solution design. So taking any of those strategic changes or more tactical changes, executing them, but in a lower risk type of fashion as well. So all in all, combining them all together, successful innovation is both knowing your current state, so where you are now, but also the three parts of the pyramid there about the next step as well. So again, that's probably not too surprising, certainly in day-to-day activity, but why do we actually look to innovate? So here are some key reasons why, and you'll probably be familiar with these types of challenges. Now, if we split into sort of two groups here, on the more strategic side, we think about the average organization or business that obviously wants to grow. So encouraging growth and therefore aligning to your strategy. And it's not, again, something that happens overnight. Lots of smaller changes that drive to the ultimate result. Another strategic element would be differentiation. So again, thinking and doing your market research about your competitors, etc. How do we do better in our market? Is there something that makes us stronger? For example, the use of AI or that kind of thing. But likewise, innovation isn't just about the long-term plans and the strategic plans as well. There are things that you can do right now. And sometimes they're driven by market forces, for example. Sometimes they're driven by internal demand. So things like increasing productivity levels. If you find people in the organization accountable for what they're producing or in terms of output, etc., that's basically a form of innovation. So crowdsourcing ideas, etc., to drive the organization forward so people feel involved. But I guess one of the biggest examples that we can see in terms of the tactical side of things, so reacting to, external factors. So we've had COVID in the past how many years now? So adapting to changes that you weren't expecting. So shifting to, obviously, an online mode of working rather than being in the office 5 days a week, etc. So these can all be classed as forms of innovation, and how we actually deliver on them. You need the right tools in place and techniques to support all of this innovation. Well, it could be pen and paper, but let's talk about a bit more in a second. But to break up our session up a little bit for today, let's start with a bit of a question. So I'm going to launch into a poll in a second, and I've set it for 30 seconds. So if you are looking to participate, then fill in your answer and let's have a look and discuss very briefly what you've got in mind. So for those that are on the call, the question is, what type of innovation is your organization currently focusing on the most? Yeah, very good indeed. So I don't think you guys can actually see the poll and the results there, but there's actually quite a bit of a split there. But most of you are focusing around these, mostly the middle two. So yeah, makes sense. Customers drive obviously profits and revenues and all that kind of stuff, and you want to provide the best customer experience. And we also see here that I think the majority is around improvements to the landscape. So what we saw previously is around the more tactical side of things. So there's of course no right or wrong answer there, but it's nice to see basically the distribution on there. So hopefully the next section will give you a bit more of a set of tools within your toolkit to start experimenting, I would say, because innovation is the key, and you need a way of representing that in a coherent manner. So for those of you that have used the business model canvas before, okay, yeah, hopefully this will be just a bit of a refresher. For those that haven't used the business model canvas, this is basically the sciencey bit that we'll talk about right now. So as a bit of a background, it was developed by a nice chap called Alexander Osterwalder in 2005, so not too long well, actually quite a while now, so almost 20 years, but it was adopted as a strategic management template for developing new business models, hence the business model canvas, but also documenting what you have right now. So when we looked at the poll question around designing improvements to a landscape, and we'll see in a second, this is a great way to start putting into pictures, so run words and pictures, I suppose, on how you can improve and target certain outcomes. Now, putting it into an actual picture is formed of 9 key blocks. So the business model canvas itself has got sort of customer-focused elements there, which links into the customer demands and expectations piece. So talking about customer segments or different markets, customer relationships and how you serve them, the communication channels that you'll be using, so basically your interfaces to your customer web, etc. But also the most important part, which is in the middle, is around the value proposition. So what are you actually aiming to deliver to your customer segments? But in support, you've got partners that will be enabled in there. You've got activities that will be performed as part of the mode of operation, so to speak, and you'll need resources as well. But all of that will have a cost associated with it. So you've got in the bottom left, the cost structures, but also the revenue structures. So you're hoping to make a bit of money, so to speak, for the enterprise there. So that's the business model canvas in a nutshell. So just as a bit of recap. And just another quick question. And since we've explained what the business model canvas is, let's take a look at another quick poll question. So nothing too ominous. I'll put 30 seconds on the timer here and see how many of you in the audience today have actually used it and to what extent. Very good. Yeah, so it's a bit of almost a 50-50 split. So one of you in the group, and congrats on that, has used the business model canvas quite extensively. So it'd be actually interesting to hear, maybe as a follow-up, your experiences in using the business model canvas in terms of obviously change and transformation and stuff like that. But the majority, well, about 55% of you have used it only occasionally. So hopefully what we'll cover next will drive you to perhaps use it a bit more frequently. Well, of course, you always tailor the outputs to your stakeholders, but let's have a look in a bit of extra as well. So if you haven't used, for those of you that haven't used the business model canvas before, of course, the main focus is building an existing or documenting existing or a target business model. But the use cases for the canvas itself, obviously, yeah, strategic planning and development, that's one of the takeaways that you can build there. So almost like a strategy on a page, because it involves people, processes, and other things as well. And yeah, we've seen this already, but understanding customers. So just sketching it out and seeing the landscape of what you offer, who you offer it to, how you offer it, etc. But also, and this is the main focus of today's session is around innovation and ideation. So you can use it as a way to capture thoughts and other things and designs as well. So the other ones that will be pretty applicable is even just using as a communication mechanism. So across your organization, how do you align, building in a simple language that people can hopefully understand a bit easier. So rather than complex architecture diagrams and that kind of thing. But the other thing that I've certainly seen a lot of use, at least in the past couple of years, is around mergers and acquisitions. So comparing and contrasting value propositions of your current organization, an acquisition target, and it helps you to make a more informed sort of decision there. How does that actually reflect or be supported by enterprise architecture itself? So I'm not going to read everything on the slide on the left there, but of course, we often think as enterprise architecture as that bridge between not only business and IT, but if we translate that into innovation terminology, that's innovation and reality. So that is to see if you have an innovation idea, so you can plan and design all of that, but also help to integrate it into the real world, so the operating model. So that is the reality that's transformed from the originating design that you have in your head or on the page, etc. So in that sense, another technique or another template that is closely related to the business model canvas is the operating model canvas. So this is more a traditional architecture type of tool, operating model and architecture sort of hand in hand. But you can see there's a bit of an overlap as well. So the value propositions that also exist in the business model canvas, but you've got the other pieces which are, again, overlapping customers, but you've got suppliers, locations, the way you deliver, so value delivery chains, management systems, so IT landscape, technology landscapes, information as well. So that's, if you want to use this in isolation, it's something that's pretty powerful as well, but the sum of parts, I think that's where the true power lies. So not only do you have the strategy, but you also have the operating model side of things as well. So in essence, there's a enhanced business model canvas that brings together more the customer facing types of stuff, so consumers and channels, but also the back end operating model. And yeah, just the term for it is the enhanced business model canvas. So component parts brought together to give an even bigger picture view of who you want to serve, but also how you're actually going to deliver it. And so let's take a look at a bit of a practical application of this. So I've already mentioned or positioned the enhanced business model canvas. I've put into action already. And so what we want to do is, switch lenses very, very quickly. And although it's not a mandatory thing to use technology or tooling to support the design of these things, but of course, those are your architects in the room today. Well, it certainly helps the cause because you've got that centralization, you've got that collaboration and other things like that. So let me switch to my browser window. So a bit of a live demo here. And yeah, this time it's a bit more of a completed version of the enhanced business model canvas. So when we look at this from an architecture perspective, now, first of all, it's a canvas. Now, I could do this in a Visio, I could do it in a PowerPoint deck, etc. But the key is deriving from data. So my particular scenario here is I'm using an imaginary organization, a financial organization that's looking to enhance a couple of things. So in terms of a strategic focus, okay, we're looking to, or rather the organization is looking to enhance user experience. And also in turn, a side aspect is to reduce the customer service costs, but also, enhancing the user experience. So getting results quicker, answers the question, doing quick tasks very, very quickly indeed. So therefore capturing in a business model canvas. And just to prove that, of course, it is driven by data in essence. Now, these are traditional elements that we build as part of our architecture. So we've got, in terms of our business model here, we've got stakeholders. We've got business collaborations that explain our customer relationships. We've got the communication channels that we, let's see, would like to offer certain aspects or customer service through, so websites, messaging apps, etc. And on the left-hand side, we've got partners represented by business actors here, locations that we operate in, so very simple example here, and also the value streams as well. What I'll talk about a bit later on is, again, the practical examples of using the business model canvas as essentially a starting point to then drill down into further detail or obviously support further collaboration. But again, as a bit of a takeaway here, this imaginary financial organization wants to improve on their user experience, reduce the customer service costs, and therefore look into or investigate the use of AI as part of obviously the technology stack to drive better processes and stuff like that. So of course, this doesn't just build itself. It is a starting point for communicating the, I guess, target state, so the end of the journey or part of the realization of the journey. And that's, of course, where architecture really needs to support with the detail underneath it. So we know that the customer support processes are going to change as a result of implementing this new business model canvas, basically. So if we drill into the detail, now we've got a business process modeled in basically BPMN here. And yeah, it's a bit of a noddy example, but our target customer support process is going to use obviously chatbot to support quicker query resolution. There would be required some integration to existing systems. So we've got Zendesk as a support system here that's included as part of the process design. So you can start to see it doesn't mean that we just have architecture working on its own. There will be other people that know the processes, obviously customer support team members that will need to be enabled and trained on the final implementation of the processes. So that helps to, again, position the right artifacts, the right people within the organization, but all comes from the starting point of the business model canvas. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are technologists in the room today, but what we typically do within enterprise architecture is leverage reference models and patterns and other things like that. So just saying that we've got an AI platform that we want to design and implement to support this AI advisory, etc., is not enough. So that's where out there's plenty of models that will help you to have a starting point. And that's the benefit of having a centralized repository to store not only your business model that explains the strategic side of things and customer facing stuff, but then you've got the drill down into, for example, this is an OpenAI end-to-end chat implementation reference model. And you can use this as a way to communicate, but you can also layer it on with other details as well to make sure everyone has the right information at their fingertip. But again, that's part of the beauty of having different stakeholders that have different requirements that you need to communicate with. But we use the business model canvas essentially as the center point to be able to drive additional value to the rest of the organization. Okay, so let's flick the switch very, very quickly in a moment. But of course, the other areas that we haven't really investigated today is, okay, well, that's kind of the design aspects, but also factoring into the more operational side of things, we can obviously relate to project landscapes and other things as well. Okay. Right, so back to our deck. Just a final bit of, I guess, wrap up here in terms of the topic itself. So what we've covered today is a bit of a starting point and hopefully a bit of inspiration on how to use the business model canvas in a better manner. But the journey, again, we talked about that already, doesn't stop there. So what we've covered today is really about getting the foundations right. So we talked a little bit about strategy at the start of things. Okay, we talked a bit about innovation, but in order for it to work, okay, stakeholders require basically a couple of things. So easy to understand, that's really, really critical there. So that's why sometimes communicating in just technical language isn't always the best starting point. So for different stakeholders, it may apply, but for the high levels and the senior execs, etc., something easy to understand for people involved. So structure also helps for repeatability. so replication. And that's where something, again, like the business model canvas is pretty good because it's tried and tested, but you can, of course, tailor it to suit. Now, it may not always be easy to understand for everyone, but at least it's a bit easier than lots of boxes and lots of lines and all that kind of stuff. And the third point is around familiarity. Of course, that's something that always happens overnight, but if you obviously communicate it well, that's something that people will hopefully eventually be familiar with. And so I really love that format. Let's use it again and again. But the key thing is around collaboration, which we've kind of addressed in the practical example there, that it should cover everyone on the shop floor, say process, executors, etc., strategists, architects. So it is a team sport. And the last tips that we have for, well, basically not this but other topics in general, is to be able to put the information out there. So as they say, sharing is caring. Feedback is also important as well. So if it's a nice format that people consume and you've got a area that you can comment and feedback, that's also great as well. But the best tip that I could share here is to just get started. So if you sketch things out, try and test it, obviously get your stakeholders consuming content, review and feedback as you can improve step by step. So hopefully that will give us a few minutes for Q&A. So you can use the chat window. I think there's a Q&A section there. So let's see if there are any questions that the audience has today. Okay, good stuff. Just that, wait a couple more moments. We've got about 3 minutes left. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. Aha, there we are. So actually, I found some in the side chat here. So there's a question around tooling. So this is around, does the tool support tracing of a particular element and find the impact? Yes, absolutely. So it's a repository-based tool, and I actually forgot to announce the name of the platform. So see, it's one from us, Value Blue. It's the Blue Dolphin platform. Yeah, so it's a centralized repository that allows you to model not only the business model elements, but the rest of the architecture, which you can click through and do your impact analysis on. So that was one question that's come up on there. And a comment on the poll being a bit quick, but radio. So we had some other questions here around, I've got another screen here, around using the business model canvas when starting out with enterprise architecture. So I would always say that use of any particular techniques or structure, etc., depends always on your audience. But we have found, certainly at Value Blue, so for planning product developments, etc., the business model canvas is a great way to start off that conversation. And then you start to refine the detail down as you go through. And the question from Vish around the obviously tracing of particular elements, you eventually get to that point where you can trace through the impact of change of absolutely anything indeed. All right, so what do we also have here? So I need to read the screen. So can you modify the business model canvas for different audiences or industries? Yeah, so the example that we just gave there, it was loosely based on a financial example, but anywhere that you're documenting strategies or changes or obviously operating models, etc. Now, any industry, you can definitely lead it into that. Okay, so any other questions there? So we've got about a minute left. So I am going to, and my colleague is instructing me to give an output here. So of course, yeah, that was only a bit of a taster on the topic of using the business model canvas, a bit of a taster around the Blue Dolphin platform as well. But of course, if you like to learn more about both the topic or the tool, or want to set up another session to discuss in more detail, just obviously connect to one of our account managers. Or obviously for additional content, for example, a strategic planning ebook. Obviously, it could be a demonstration or additional workshop as well. So I think I've hit half past the hour, and that's all we've got time for today. But it's been a pleasure presenting to everyone on the webinar today. So let us know if you have any other queries, and we'll be happy to assist. And for anyone that's still on the call, yeah, we do have Archimate support as part of our contact form. But thanks all.